My ex-wife and her new man tried breaking into my house. Now they're both in jail. I'm 41, male, and I work as a mechanic in a small Midwestern town. My divorce was finalized just 6 months ago, and it was a relief to walk away with some dignity intact. My ex-wife, Jill, and I had argued nonstop for nearly 2 years. Right after the paperwork went through, I decided to make a fresh start by buying a modest three-bedroom home near my workshop. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like a solid milestone in reclaiming my life. For the first few weeks, I took pride in every corner of that house. Freshly painted walls, newly installed kitchen cabinets, a small backyard with enough space for barbecues. It was my safe haven, a place I could live on my own terms, away from the drama that consumed my marriage. I didn't think I'd ever have to deal with Jill again, aside from a few straggling financial matters. However, strange things started happening. I'd come home from work and notice that certain items weren't where I left them. Nothing huge, but the couch pillows out of place or mail spread across the coffee table. Initially, I thought I was just forgetting where I put things. Then one evening, I found the front door slightly ajar, even though I was locked it that morning. When I mentioned this to a coworker, he joked about ghosts. But something in my gut told me I wasn't imagining it. A few days later, I caught a glimpse of Jill's car parked down the street. It disappeared a moment later, but it was unmistakable. Same license plate, same dent near the taillight. Confused, I tried convincing myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe she was visiting someone nearby. But tension nagged at me, refusing to let go. Jill had always been the entitled sort, convinced the world owed her the best of everything. Her new boyfriend, Jake, from what I heard, shared that mindset, like they were some golden couple deserving of endless perks. During the divorce proceedings, she demanded outrageous sums of alimony, complaining it wasn't fair I'd upgraded my life while she had to start over. The judge didn't buy her story, and she walked away with less than she wanted. I figured that would be the end of her meddling. Clearly, I was wrong. One fateful afternoon, I returned from a busy day at the shop. My usual routine was to let myself in, toss my keys on the kitchen counter, and head for a quick shower. This time, my key wouldn't fit the lock. I tried again, jiggling it carefully, still nothing. My heart pounded with apprehension. I rang the doorbell, and after a tense pause, the door cracked open. Jake stood there, glaring. "This isn't your house anymore," he snapped and slammed the door in my face. I stood on the front porch, stunned, gripping my bag of groceries. Was this some twisted prank? As I processed what had just happened, I heard Jill's voice from inside, telling him to keep me out. Realizing the locks must have been changed, I felt a surge of disbelief and anger. How had they even gotten in? More importantly, what on earth made them think they had the right to take over my property? I pounded on the door, shouting, "Open up, this is my house." Jack cracked it open slightly and sneered. "Not anymore." Then he shoved me back, causing me to stumble off the porch. I heard laughter from inside, and Jill piped up, "Maybe you should have paid me more alimony." The door slammed shut again. Stunned, I stepped backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. My heart raced as I circled around the house, checking windows. Every entry point was locked or barricaded. I peered through the living room window and saw them settling onto my couch, flipping through my TV channels like they owned the place. This was beyond bizarre. It was outright trespassing. But the moment I pulled out my phone to call the police, a chill ran down my spine. Was there a chance this could backfire on me somehow? Could they spin this as me harassing them? Anger won out over caution. I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. The dispatcher was calm, instructing me to wait outside and let officers handle it. Within 10 minutes, 2 squad cars rolled up. I felt a flicker of relief. But that relief vanished when Jill stepped onto the porch, hands on her hips, complaining to the officers that I was harassing her in our home. Our home? She'd never even been on the title. I had purchased this place well after the divorce was final. The police asked for documents, so I showed them the deed and my driver's license, pointing out that her name was nowhere on it. She tried to argue that she had rights due to our past marriage, claiming I had promised her a house. The officers exchanged glances and asked her to provide proof. Of course, she had none. Jake then stepped in, ranting that I had stolen the house from her because of the divorce. It was so absurd I nearly laughed. But Jake's tone was aggressive, and the cops quickly told him to back off. It looked like things might be resolved peacefully, but Jill's entitled streak flared up. She started screaming about how I owed her better living conditions, that I was cruel to force her onto the streets. Jake threatened to get their lawyer friends involved. Meanwhile, the officers were trying to maintain order. After a few tense minutes, it seemed the police had heard enough. They instructed Jill and Jake to vacate the premises immediately, warning that any further trespassing could lead to arrest. They sulked off to their car, cursing at me and spouting nonsense about revenge. The officers suggested I change the locks, yet again, or hire a security system to avoid future break-ins. I thanked them, feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and lingering apprehension. I thought that was the end of it. However, just 2 days later, I came home from work to find them both inside again. This time, they had barricaded the front door with a heavy dresser. Looking through the window, I saw boxes. My boxes strewn about, as if they'd tossed my belongings aside to make room for their stuff. Rage bubbled up in my chest. How dare they? I immediately called the police a second time. But when the officers arrived, Jill and her boyfriend refused to come out. They shouted obscenities through the locked door, insisting they had every right to stay. One officer pounded on the door, warning them they were committing criminal trespass. Jake roared back, "We have squatters' rights." I couldn't believe my ears. Squatters' rights typically don't apply to individuals breaking in, changing locks, and forcibly removing the legal owner. Yet they were desperately grasping at any excuse. At that point, the officers requested backup. More squad cars arrived, lights flashing in my quiet neighborhood. Neighbors stood on their porches, murmuring in confusion as the standoff escalated. I felt humiliated, but also determined. I refused to let these two con artists push me around in my own home. Eventually, the police gained entry through a side window with the help of a locksmith I'd called. Inside, they found Jill and her boyfriend barricaded in the master bedroom, hurling personal insults at the officers. After a tense half hour, both of them were forcibly removed from the property in handcuffs, ranting about how unfair it all was. Jill shouted over her shoulder, "I'll see you in court. You can't get away with this." Jake spat accusations that I'd bribed the cops. Meanwhile, I stood in my front yard numb. Nothing felt real. This was like a scene out of a twisted TV drama. That night, I spoke at length with a local prosecutor. They confirmed I had grounds to press criminal charges for trespassing and breaking and entering. On top of that, there could be charges related to assault or harassment if I chose, especially since they physically shoved me off my own porch. I remember exhaling a shaky breath. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting, but the other part realized they wouldn't stop unless I fought back legally. So I pressed charges. The next week was a whirlwind of legal paperwork. I had to provide the deed, proof of purchase, plus sign affidavits describing how they broke in and changed the locks. The prosecutor's office compiled it all with assistance from the police reports. Jill's prior angry outbursts also didn't help her case. Then, to top it off, Jake had a string of petty crimes in his past, from vandalism to credit card fraud. It looked like a slam dunk case from a legal standpoint. On the day they were arraigned, I showed up in court feeling both anxious and resolute. Jill glowered at me from across the room, Jake whispering furiously to her. Their lawyer attempted to spin a story about how I had promised them accommodation after the divorce, claiming it was some handshake agreement. My lawyer coolly presented the timeline, showing I purchased the home long after the divorce settlement, with no mention of any shared ownership. Still, they kept trying. Their sense of entitlement was astounding. Jake even interrupted the judge, insisting that I'd exploited Jill financially. The judge quickly shut him down, warning him about contempt of court if he continued. Hearing them squirm was oddly satisfying. But the real satisfaction came when bail was set high and they realized they'd likely remain in custody unless they paid up. Neither of them seemed to have the funds. In the end, the court found enough evidence to move forward with the criminal trial. Jill and her boyfriend both spent a few weeks in jail, awaiting further proceedings. I discovered through mutual acquaintances that they tried everything to negotiate an out-of-court settlement, but I refused. I was done playing nice. The day they pled guilty to avoid a harsher sentence, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. They receive a combination of probation, fines, and longer jail time for Jake due to his criminal record. Walking out of the courthouse that evening, I was exhausted but strangely at peace. I'd had doubts about pressing charges, worried it might make me look vindictive or escalate tensions. But in the end, I realized they left me no choice. They broke into my home, humiliated me in front of my neighbors, and showed zero remorse. It was time for real consequences. Back at the house, I finally replaced every lock and installed a robust security system. My father helped me repair the damages they left behind: scratched floors, broken window sills, and torn up furniture. Little by little, I reclaimed my space. Each improvement felt like another step away from the chaos, a reminder that I had the right to protect what was mine. Looking back, the entire ordeal taught me that sometimes people refuse to respect boundaries unless forced by law. Jill's entitled attitude convinced her she deserved my property just because we'd once been married. Jill and Jake tried every dirty trick they could muster: squatters' rights, fake promises, intimidation. In the end, the legal system reminded them that actions have consequences. Nowadays, I enjoy a quiet routine, tinkering in my garage workshop and grilling in my backyard on weekends. I keep a close circle of friends who supported me through the chaos. Occasionally, I'll hear from distant acquaintances that Jill still blames me for ruining her life, but I don't lose sleep over it. She made her choices, and I made mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.
My cousin faked my mom's death as a prank. So, I refused to attend her wedding and cut her out of my life. I'm 15. I never thought a birthday prank would spiral into this much drama, but here we are. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment everything changed: a simple rubber snake on my cousin Kobe's birthday cake. Our family has always been big on pranks. It's practically tradition. Every birthday, every holiday, someone's getting pranked. Usually, it's all in good fun. Kobe, an ER nurse who's normally the life of the party, had always been one of the main instigators. But this year was different. The party had started normally enough. The decorations were up, music was playing, and everyone was in high spirits. I remember helping my aunt set up the cake, a beautiful 3-tiered vanilla creation with buttercream frosting, Kobe's favorite. The snake looked ridiculous sitting there, its fake rubber tongue flicking out near the happy birthday writing. We all expected laughs, maybe a playful scream, the usual reaction to our family pranks. Are you kidding me? Kobe had snapped when she saw the snake. Her face turned an alarming shade of red, eyes blazing with an anger none of us had ever seen before. I can't believe you guys would do this. The room went silent, the festive atmosphere evaporating instantly. We were all taken aback by her reaction. It seemed excessive for such a harmless prank, but none of us could have predicted what would happen next. Looking back, maybe we should have seen the warning signs. Kobe had been different lately, more on edge, snapping at small things. But we chalked it up to wedding stress. She was in the middle of planning her ceremony, after all. If only we'd known what she was capable of. A few days later, I was sitting in the school cafeteria, picking at my lunch and chatting with friends about upcoming exams. When my phone rang, seeing Kobe's name flash across the screen, I figured she was picking me up early, maybe for a dress fitting or something wedding-related. We'd been close enough that she'd asked me to be her flower girl, even though at 15 I was older than usual for the role. "Hey, Kobe, what's up?" I answered, still half focused on my friend's story about chemistry class. Her voice was eerily calm, almost clinical. There's been an accident. My stomach clenched. Something about her tone made my blood run cold. What do you mean? It's your mom. She didn't make it. Car crash. She proceeded to describe the scene in horrific detail. The twisted metal, the blood, things no 15-year-old should have to hear about their mother. The world stopped spinning. The cafeteria noise faded to a distant buzz. My mother and I might not have the perfect relationship. What teenager does? But she's still my mom. The thought of her being gone. I felt bile rising in my throat as Kobe continued with her grotesque description. With trembling fingers, I tried calling Mom. No answer. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I stumbled to the bathroom, barely making it before I started sobbing. Finally, I called my dad, barely able to speak through the tears. Dad, I choked out, Mom's dead. There was a pause on the other end. What? I just talked to her 20 minutes ago.
What are you talking about?
After I explained what Kobe had told me, Dad's voice turned ice cold. Stay where you are. I'm picking you up. It wasn't until later that I learned he'd immediately called Mom, confirming she was perfectly fine at work. That evening, my aunt, not Kobe's mom, called an emergency family meeting. We all gathered in her living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat there, still shaking from the day's events, while my parents flanked me protectively on either side. What were you thinking? My aunt demanded of Kobe, who sat across from us, looking surprisingly unrepentant. Kobe shifted uncomfortably, but there was a defiant set to her jaw. It was just payback for the snake prank. Payback? I stood up, shaking with rage and leftover fear. You told me my mother was dead. That's not a prank. That's cruel. My voice broke on the last word, and Mom pulled me close. I'm sorry, Kobe said, but her apology felt hollow, like she was reading from a script. I overreacted. I never want to speak to you again, I declared, and I meant it. The room erupted into chaos after that, some defending Kobe, others condemning her actions. But I didn't care. At that moment, something fundamental had broken between us. Fast forward to now. Kobe's wedding was supposed to be the event of the year. A grand affair at the local botanical gardens, with fairy lights and flower arches. The works. I was supposed to be her flower girl. Even though I'm 15, they wanted me involved because of our special bond. Or what used to be our special bond, anyway. But after what happened, I pulled out. Not just from being a flower girl, but from attending altogether. You're being petty, Kobe yelled when I told her. People will ask questions. What am I supposed to tell them? Let them ask, I shot back. Tell them the truth, that you told your teenage cousin her mother was dead, as revenge for a rubber snake. The day of the wedding came, and despite the pressure from various family members, I stood firm in my decision not to attend. Instead, I spent the day with my best friend, trying to ignore the flood of texts from relatives telling me I was being difficult. But then something unexpected happened. Her fiancé, who I've always been close to since he and Kobe used to babysit me, tried to intervene. Look, he messaged me, I know what she did at school was wrong, but it was just a prank. That's when I lost it. Just a prank? She told me my mother was dead. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I sent him screenshots of the therapy appointments I'd needed afterward, the nightmares I still sometimes have. He went quiet for a moment. Wait, what? She told me she just sent you a scary picture. That's when everything unraveled. Turns out Kobe and her mom had lied to him about what really happened. They downplayed the incident, making it sound like a harmless Halloween-style joke rather than the psychological torture it actually was. When I told him the truth, he was horrified. The wedding ceremony was already underway when he got my message. Guests were seated, music was playing, and Kobe was getting her final touches done in the bridal suite. According to my cousin who was there, her fiancé waited until she walked down the aisle. Then, in front of everyone, he simply said, I can't marry someone who would do that to a child, and walked away. The chaos that followed was spectacular. Kobe collapsed in tears, her mother started screaming, and guests sat in stunned silence as the groom walked out of his own wedding. He left to stay with his mother, and now everyone's blaming me for ruining their relationship. You had no right to tell him. Kobe's mom screamed at me over the phone later that day. Do you have any idea how much money we spent on this wedding? How embarrassing is this? No right to tell the truth? I fired back. Maybe you shouldn't have lied in the first place. Here's the thing. I've known them as a couple since I was 8. They've always seemed solid, which is why I feel terrible about this whole situation. Her fiancé was always kind to me, would help me with homework when he came over, never treated me like an annoying kid. He and Kobe seemed perfect together, both in healthcare, both loved traveling, both wanted the same things in life. Or so we thought. But as my best friend pointed out, you didn't ruin anything. She told me firmly. Their relationship is struggling because Kobe lied, not because you told the truth. She's right, of course. But it's hard not to feel guilty when your whole family is treating you like you're the villain. The wedding gifts had to be returned, deposits were lost, and Kobe's reputation in our small town took a massive hit. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. The fallout continues. My aunt insists I'm being dramatic, that I should just forgive and forget. But how do you forget something like that? How do you trust someone who could be so deliberately cruel? And more importantly, how do you trust someone who would then lie about their cruelty to the person they claim to love? Kobe has tried reaching out several times since the wedding disaster. Her messages swing wildly between apologetic and accusatory. One minute she's begging for forgiveness, the next she's blaming me for ruining her life. I've blocked her number, but she finds ways to get through, creating new social media accounts, sending messages through family members. The latest drama erupted when she showed up at my school, trying to force a confrontation. The school security had to escort her out, and now my parents are considering a restraining order. It's like the woman who used to babysit me, who taught me how to braid my hair and made me laugh when I was sad, has been replaced by someone I don't recognize at all. In the end, this isn't just about a prank gone wrong. It's about trust, about respect, about the lines we draw in relationships. Kobe crossed a line I never thought she would, and then she lied about it to the person she was planning to marry. Whatever happens to her relationship isn't on me. It's on her. My dad puts it best. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing that the people we look up to aren't always worthy of that pedestal. I'm only 15, but I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, trust, and treating each other with basic human decency. And sometimes, the most respectful thing you can do is walk away from those who don't understand that. As for her fiancé, he reached out to me last week. He's doing okay, processing everything and focusing on his work. He thanked me for telling him the truth, saying it helped him dodge a bullet. Sometimes the right thing hurts, he wrote, but that doesn't make it any less right. Looking back at that rubber snake on the birthday cake, it seems almost absurd that something so small could trigger such massive changes. But maybe the snake wasn't the trigger at all. Maybe it just exposed cracks that were already there, truths that needed to come to light. I don't know what the future holds for our family. The wounds are still fresh, the lines still clearly drawn between those who think I should get over it and those who understand why I can't. But I do know this. I'd rather stand alone in my truth than be accepted for pretending something cruel was okay. Sometimes growing up means making hard choices, standing your ground even when it feels like the whole world is against you. I may have lost my relationship with Kobe, but I've gained something more valuable, the understanding that I deserve to be treated with respect and the courage to demand it.
My family used my money for a secret Hawaii vacation, so I made sure their paradise turned into hell. I'm 27. I was 4 when my life shifted in ways I couldn't have imagined. It was then that my sister Emily was born, and suddenly I became invisible in my own home. From the moment she could sing, it was as though the spotlight was stolen from me, never to return. Looking back now, I can trace every moment that led to the final betrayal that would ultimately set me free. My earliest memories are saturated with the sound of Emily's voice, angelic and powerful, capturing every ounce of attention at every family gathering. By the time Emily was 3, she had already become the undisputed star of every family event. Her performances weren't just appreciated. They were expected, demanded, celebrated with a fervor that left no room for anyone else to shine. Me, I stood in the corners, holding plates of snacks I'd helped Mom prepare, doing what I was told. I became the silent stagehand in Emily's ongoing show. Her voice could stop any conversation in its tracks, and everyone, including our parents, believed she was destined for greatness. I still remember the way relatives would coo over her, barely noticing me unless they needed someone to fetch more drinks. "Carrie, go help your sister practice her scales," Mom would say without even glancing up from the video she was recording of Emily, singing for the umpteenth time. "And make sure you've done the dishes first." The dishes always came first, then the laundry, then whatever else needed doing while Emily pursued her destiny. I was 8 then, watching Emily twirl around in an expensive pink tutu while I learned to use the washing machine. Mom was too busy coordinating Emily's singing lessons to teach me, so I taught myself, standing on a stool to reach the controls. One time, I turned a load of whites pink, and the punishment was swift: no allowance for 3 months to pay for new clothes. Emily's new dance costume that same week cost more than all the ruined laundry combined. Years passed, and Emily's stardom seemed to only grow while I was stuck managing the household chores, dealing with the blame for her mistakes, and quietly resenting the way my parents treated me. Then came the day that changed everything. Emily was 11, and I was 15 when she and her friends went to the mall, something I'd never been allowed to do at that age. The next morning, Emily was sick, her throat sore, and what started as a mild infection quickly became a severe strep throat, leaving her voice damaged beyond repair. The doctor's words fell like bombs in the hospital room. "Her vocal cords may never be the same." I can still see Mom's mascara running down her face, Dad's hands shaking as he filled out the insurance forms. When they returned home, Mom's grief turned to rage, and I was the target. "This is your fault," she screamed, her face contorted with anger. "You should have been watching her. But I was doing the laundry and cleaning the bathroom like you asked." I tried to explain, my voice small against her fury. It didn't matter, nothing I said ever mattered. "No excuses." Dad slammed his hand on the table so hard the dishes rattled. "You're grounded for a month, no phone, no TV, no nothing." That night, locked in my room with nothing but my thoughts for company, I made myself a promise. I would leave. I would build a life where I was more than just a servant in this house, where I didn't have to live under Emily's shadow. I just had to make it through a few more years. Then came the college acceptance letter from State College. I had been looking for an opportunity to break free, to build a life for myself. "It's the most affordable option," I said as I pushed the letter across the dinner table, hope fluttering in my chest despite years of disappointment. My parents' response was swift and final. "We don't have the money, Carrie," Dad muttered without looking up from his plate. Emily snickered from the other side of the table, twirling her fork in her pasta. "Maybe you should have developed some actual talents," she mocked, her voice raspy from the damage but still dripping with contempt. "Instead of just doing chores all day." I begged them, offering to take out loans, to work part-time, anything to make it happen. "I'll pay it back once I graduate," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "I promise." But they refused to even consider it. "Some people are meant for college, others aren't. Accept it and move on," Dad said flatly, as if he was discussing the weather rather than my future. That night I called Rachel, my best friend since middle school, crying into the phone. "They won't help. They won't even consider it." The words came out between sobs, years of pain and rejection pouring out. Rachel, always my lifeline in the storm, invited me over. The next evening, I sat in the restaurant, Rachel's family business, pouring my heart out to Mrs. Kim. What happened next still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. "We've watched you grow up, Carrie," Mrs. Kim said with a warm smile that reached her eyes. "You're like a second daughter to us. We'll pay your tuition, but you'll work here part-time after classes, pay us back slowly, no interest." I was speechless. For the first time in my life, someone believed in me. Someone saw me as more than just Emily's sister or the family maid. The Kims became my real family, supporting me through college while my own parents barely acknowledged my existence. I moved into my dorm at State College, and the distance from my parents only solidified the reality that I would never be enough for them. Still, I worked hard balancing school and my part-time job at the Kims restaurant. When I finally graduated, I'd paid back every penny to the Kims, who tried to refuse the money but eventually accepted it with pride in their eyes. The day I received a job offer at a good salary, I felt like everything was finally falling into place. I wore the suit I bought with my own money, and within a year I was leading my own team. Success felt sweet, but the hole in my heart where family should be remained. It was Christmas when everything started to unravel. Something felt different as I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house was unusually quiet, and when I entered, Mom greeted me in an old sweater, looking defeated. "Emily's not coming," she said, her voice low and tired. I glanced around the room, taking in the changes. The table, which should have been groaning under the weight of Christmas food, had only a store-bought ham and microwaved sides. "We've had some setbacks," Mom said quietly, wringing her hands. "Your father's investment didn't pan out. We had to take out loans." My heart sank. For years, I had been told that college wasn't for me, that I wasn't worth the investment. And now, they were telling me that they couldn't afford a real Christmas dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me. But despite everything they'd done, despite the years of neglect and blame, I found myself offering to help. I ordered a full holiday feast from the best caterer in town, spending money I'd earned through hard work and determination. I watched as they dug into food I'd bought, their praise for the meal never quite extending to me. Afterward, Mom cautiously approached me in the kitchen. "Since you're doing so well now," she began, her voice honey-sweet, "maybe you could help us out, just temporarily." Part of me wanted to remind them of how they had treated me, of the college dreams they'd crushed, of the years of emotional abuse. But instead, I heard myself saying, "I'll set up a card for you, but there's a limit, $1,000 a month." They agreed eagerly, promising to use it only for necessities. For a few months, everything seemed fine. The charges were reasonable: groceries, utilities, basic needs. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, we could build a new relationship based on mutual respect. Then came the betrayal that would change everything. It started with a casual scroll through Instagram one morning. There on my feed was a photo I was never meant to see. Emily and her fiancé, the perfect couple, posing on a pristine beach in Hawaii. The caption read, "Living our best life at the Grand Wailea. Thanks to the best parents ever for this amazing family vacation." They had forgot to block me from Emily's social media. My hands shaking, I opened my banking app. The charges hit me like physical blows, $40,000 in total. First-class flights, luxury resort accommodations, spa treatments, sunset cruises, exclusive dining experiences, all charged to my account over the past month. They hadn't asked. They hadn't invited me. They hadn't even tried to hide it well. I called them immediately, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me. "Why did you use my card to pay for this trip?" I asked, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Mom answered, and I could hear music and laughter in the background. "We just decided to take a little break," she said casually, as if she was discussing a trip to the grocery store. Emily needed this after her engagement, and her in-laws wanted to celebrate together. "A break," my voice cracked. "At the Grand Wailea Resort with Emily's fiancé's family." "Oh, honey," Mom's voice turned sickeningly sweet. "We would have invited you, but you're always so busy with work. We didn't want to bother you." That's when I heard Emily's voice in the background, slightly slurred from what I assumed was expensive cocktails. "Just tell her to send more money. That's all she's good for anyway." The words hit me like a slap. "Put Emily on the phone," I demanded. There was shuffling, and then Emily's voice came through clearly. "What's your problem?" she asked, annoyed. "It's not like you can't afford it. You're just jealous because you weren't invited." "Jealous?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not jealous, Emily. I'm done." "Done with what?" she sneered. Done being your ATM, done being used by this family. You're not family anymore, I said, throwing her words back at her before she could say them. You're just thieves. What happened next gave me more satisfaction than I care to admit. I hung up and immediately called my bank. As a premium client, I had access to their emergency services. Within hours, I had canceled the card, reported the charges as fraudulent, and started the process of legal action. The backlash was immediate and explosive. Calls and messages flooded in from all sides. My parents, Emily, our relatives, family, friends. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I posted the truth on social media, showing everyone exactly what had happened. I included screenshots of the charges, Emily's photos, and a brief explanation of the years of manipulation that had led to this moment. The consequences were far-reaching and devastating for them. My parents had to beg friends for money to get home from Hawaii. Their future in-laws, who had been led to believe they were being treated to a dream vacation, were horrified to discover they had been unwitting participants in fraud. Emily's engagement imploded when her fiancé's family learned the truth about her character. Mom and Dad tried everything to fix the situation. They showed up at my apartment, my office, even the Kim's restaurant, begging for forgiveness. They claimed they had only wanted to give Emily a special engagement celebration, that they would pay me back eventually, that they had meant to tell me about the trip. But I was done with the lies, done with the manipulation, done with being the family servant and ATM. The final straw came when they tried to guilt me through family friends. They're still your parents, people would say. Emily's still your sister, family forgives. That's when I realized something important. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up isn't standing on your own, it's learning when to walk away from toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with family. I blocked them everywhere, changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, started fresh. Now, 3 years later, I sometimes hear about them through mutual acquaintances. Mom and Dad had to downsize their house. Emily works as a receptionist, her dreams of marrying into money shattered. They still tell people I abandoned them, that I'm heartless and cruel. But I don't care anymore. I have the Kims who treat me like a real family. I have Rachel who has stood by me through everything. I have my career, my peace of mind, and most importantly, my self-respect. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I think about that 4-year-old girl who became invisible when her sister was born. I wish I could tell her that she would grow up to be strong, successful, and finally, gloriously visible. Not as Emily's sister, not as her parents' servant, but as herself. For the first time in my life, I am no longer invisible. I am no longer waiting in the wings of someone else's show. I am the star of my own life, and that's worth more than any family fortune or false loyalty. Some might call it revenge, but I call it justice. Some might call it cruel, but I call it necessary. And some might call it sad, but I call it freedom. Because sometimes the best family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you choose for yourself.
My family forced me to babysit their kids during our vacation. But this time I chose Italy instead. I'm 32, female, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the dependable one. The rock everyone leans on when times get tough. While my younger sisters Becky and Carrie chose the traditional path, marrying young, starting families, and settling into suburban life, I took a different route. I poured myself into my career at Preston and Associates, where I've spent the last decade climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. My office became my second home, my colleagues my extended family. The corner office I earned through countless late nights and missed weekends became my sanctuary. Sure, I missed out on certain life experiences, the kind my sisters were quick to remind me about during family gatherings, but I was okay with that. Being the person everyone could count on felt like enough. Or at least, that's what I told myself during those quiet moments when doubt would creep in. It all started with what seemed like an innocent phone call on a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk, buried in quarterly reports and marketing projections, when Becky's name flashed across my phone screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. The Anderson account wasn't going to review itself, but family always came first. That was the rule. Hey Ash, got a minute? Her voice had that familiar excitement that usually preceded a favor. I'd heard it countless times before, when she needed help moving, when her car broke down, when she needed someone to watch Lucy on short notice. I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, still typing away at my keyboard. Sure, what's up? She launched into her pitch about Mom's upcoming 60th birthday. We're planning something special, she bubbled, and we need everyone to chip in. The way she said special made me pause my typing. I knew that tone, it usually meant expensive. When she named the amount, I nearly spilled my morning coffee all over my pristine, white desk calendar. It was more than I'd spent on my last vacation, which, admittedly, had been 3 years ago. A long weekend in Miami that I'd spent mostly answering work emails by the pool. But this was for Mom, and Mom had always been there for us. Without hesitation, I pulled up my banking app and transferred the money. No problem, I said, trying to sound nonchalant about the significant dent in my savings. Happy to help make Mom's birthday special. Then came the kicker. Oh, and clear your schedule for that week, Becky added, her voice suspiciously casual. Don't plan anything else. That should have been my first warning sign. Over the next few weeks, Becky kept calling with updates about the celebration, but whenever I asked for specific details, she dodged the question like a politician avoiding a scandal. Still finalizing things, she'd say, or it's a surprise. Something felt off, but I pushed the feeling aside. After all, this was family. What could go wrong? The truth finally came out during what was supposed to be a regular family dinner. The usual suspects were there, Mom and Dad, Aunt Jennifer with her perpetual look of mild disapproval, cousins Michael and Rachel with their spouses in tow. The dining room was filled with the familiar chaos of passing dishes and overlapping conversations. It felt normal, safe. Until it wasn't. As we were finishing up the main course, Mom's signature pot roast that she'd been making since we were kids, Becky cleared her throat with theatrical emphasis. The room fell quiet in a way that felt rehearsed, practiced. We've arranged everything for Mom's birthday, she announced, beaming. We're all spending a week at Mountain Pine Resort. The table erupted in excitement, everyone except me, because I hadn't missed the way they'd all exchanged glances before Becky's announcement, the subtle looks that passed between my sisters, the way Mom wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Wait, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. A resort? When did this happen? The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't the silence of surprise, but the heavy quiet of people waiting for the other shoe to drop. I looked around the table, at the faces of people I'd known my entire life, and suddenly felt like I was among strangers. Well, honey, Mom finally said, her voice dripping with that special blend of guilt and manipulation that only mothers can perfect. We need you to watch the kids while we're away. 5 kids, all under 7, while everyone else enjoyed a ski resort. Carrie's toddler Jason, who could barely walk without creating chaos. Becky's daughter Lucy, who had recently discovered the joy of finger painting on walls. Michael's twins Tom and Anna, who seemed to operate on some secret twin frequency that only they understood. And Rachel's son Pete, whose favorite game was how many things can I stuff into the DVD player before someone notices. You're so good with them, Mom added sweetly, as if she were offering me a gift rather than a sentence. They adore you. Then came the kicker from Carrie. You'll be bored there anyway. You don't have a husband or kids. You don't need a break from family life. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. 10 years of being there for everyone, of dropping everything when they needed me, of rearranging my life to accommodate their emergencies, and this was how they saw me? As nothing more than convenient childcare? I stood up so abruptly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound harsh and jarring in the suddenly silent room. Without a word, I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, their voices fading behind me like a bad radio signal. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, watching city lights flicker through my window like distant stars, something shifted inside me. I'd spent so long being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who always said yes. But at what cost? When was the last time someone had asked me what I wanted, what I needed? The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I acted without considering anyone else's feelings or schedules. I booked a ticket to Italy. No checking calendars, no asking permission, no guilt. For once, I was putting myself first. When the week of Mom's birthday arrived, I was sitting in a cafe in Rome, sipping the best espresso I'd ever tasted, when my phone started buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from my family. "Where are you? This isn't funny, Ashley. The kids are asking for their aunt. You've ruined everything. Your mother is crying. I hope you're happy with yourself." The messages turned nasty quickly. Words like selfish, immature, ungrateful filled my screen. Even relatives I hadn't spoken to in months chimed in to express their disappointment. The family grapevine was working overtime, and I was the season's bitter harvest. I sent them one photo in response. Me, smiling in front of the Colosseum, with the caption deep in Italy trip, can't come to the phone. Then I turned off my phone, ordered another espresso, and watched the Roman sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. When I returned home a week later, they were waiting at my door like an intervention committee. The accusations flew thick and fast. How I'd ruined everything. How Becky had to stay home with all 5 kids because their husbands suddenly had important business. How Dad couldn't even ski properly because he was so upset. How Mom cried every night of what should have been her perfect birthday celebration. The more they ranted, the more absurd it all seemed, until suddenly I started laughing. They stared at me like I'd lost my mind, which only made me laugh harder. "Don't you see how ridiculous this is?" I asked, wiping tears from my eyes. "You planned this entire trip without consulting me, took my money, told me to take time off work, and just assumed I'd fall in line with your plans. And now that everything fell apart because of your assumptions, I'm the villain." "You've always helped before," Mom said, her voice small. "You've never said no." "That's exactly the problem," I replied. "Because I always helped, you started taking advantage of me. You stopped seeing me as a daughter or sister and started seeing me as free childcare. You stopped considering my feelings, my plans, my life." "That's not true," Becky protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really?" I challenged. "Then why didn't you include me in the planning? Why didn't you ask if I wanted to go to the resort? Why did you just assume I'd be happy to stay behind with 5 children while everyone else celebrated?" Mom's face hardened into an expression I'd never seen before. "If that's how you feel," she said, her voice cold as winter, "then perhaps I don't have a daughter named Ashley anymore." "If that's what you want, Mom," I said quietly, "then so be it." It's been 6 weeks since that confrontation. 6 weeks of silence, broken only by passive-aggressive social media posts about selfish people and toxic relationships. Mom writes about how some people only think about themselves. Becky posts photos of Lucy with captions about true family values. Carrie crafts long paragraphs about people who destroy family bonds with their selfishness. A few months ago, these posts would have devastated me. I would have spent hours crafting responses in my head, losing sleep over their words, wondering if maybe they were right. Now, I scroll past them with a small smile, recognizing them for what they are, attempts to control me through guilt and shame that no longer work. I've joined a book club that meets every Saturday morning. The first meeting felt strange, sitting in a coffee shop, knowing my phone wouldn't ring with a desperate plea from one of my sisters. I've booked another vacation for spring, a tour through Europe. I didn't have to check 5 other schedules or make sure it wouldn't conflict with someone else's needs. I just saw a good deal and took it. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I miss my nieces and nephews. Not as obligations or responsibilities, but as the sweet, funny little people they are. I hope that someday when they're older, they'll understand. Maybe they'll even recognize these same patterns in their own lives and choose differently. I still have mom's emergency key. I should probably mail it back, but something stops me every time. Maybe part of me hopes they'll understand someday. That they'll see how their actions and expectations were unfair, how they took advantage of my love for them. That they'll realize family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to meet everyone else's needs. I used to believe family meant everything. That bone-deep conviction was instilled in me from the moment I could understand what family meant, through countless Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, and late-night conversations where my parents would remind us that blood was thicker than water. I believed, with every fiber of my being, that my family would always have my back, no matter what. But I'm not waiting for that day anymore. I'm not putting my life on hold, hoping for their approval or understanding. Yesterday, I quietly left the family group chat. No announcement, no explanation, no drama. Just one more obligation lifted, one more source of stress removed from my life. Some might call this selfish. My family certainly does. But I've learned there's a difference between being selfish and having self-respect. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is step away from people who can't see your worth beyond what you can do for them. Family might mean everything, but it shouldn't cost you everything, especially not your sense of self.
My estranged brother betrayed me by inviting my ex to family vacation. But what happened next broke me. I'm 29, and my brother Nick is 32. Growing up, it was always clear that Nick was the favorite. He was the golden boy who could charm anyone, while I was just the dependable one, quiet, independent, and easy to overlook. I've spent years biting my tongue while Nick pushed boundaries and took advantage of people. But this time, he went too far. A few months ago, I went through a tough breakup. I was with my ex Ethan for 5 years, and I thought we had a future. Out of nowhere, he said he needed space to figure things out. That was it. No explanation, no attempt to work through things. I was crushed, but what made it worse was how Ethan handled it after. He stayed in our friend group, acting like we could just go back to being casual friends while I was left trying to pick up the pieces. Nick didn't make it any easier. He had always gotten along with Ethan, but after the breakup, he went out of his way to keep hanging out with him. I told Nick it made me uncomfortable, and he brushed it off like it was no big deal. Just because you guys broke up doesn't mean I have to stop being friends with him, he said. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the complete lack of care. I should have known he'd take things further. He always does. A few months after the breakup, my parents announced they were planning a family vacation to Mexico for their wedding anniversary. It was supposed to be just the 4 of us, me, Nick, and our parents. I wasn't exactly thrilled about spending a week with Nick, especially after how he'd been acting, but I figured I could suck it up for my parents' sake. One day, Nick casually mentioned he might bring a +1 on the trip. I thought it was his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Kara. They have one of those relationships where they break up every few months, but never really stay apart. I didn't ask too many questions because I didn't care enough to get into it. But then I found out the truth. My mom let it slip during a conversation, almost like she didn't think it was a big deal. Nick's +1 wasn't Kara. It was Ethan, my ex-boyfriend. When I asked her if she was serious, she actually tried to downplay it. Nick said Ethan really needed a break, and we thought it wouldn't bother you. You're over him by now, right? I stared at her, completely stunned. You thought it wouldn't bother me? Are you kidding me? She got defensive, saying they didn't mean to upset me, and that it was just one trip. I told her there was no way I was going if Ethan was invited. Instead of supporting me, she turned it back on me, saying I was being selfish and ruining their plans. It was like I was the problem for not being okay with spending a week with my ex. I canceled my ticket the next day. When I told Nick why, he acted like I was being ridiculous. Ethan's a great guy, he said, like that somehow made it okay. It's not like he cheated on you or anything. Why are you so hung up on this? Hearing that made my blood boil. I told him it wasn't just about Ethan. It was about him constantly crossing lines and acting like my feelings didn't matter. He rolled his eyes and said I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal. I thought that was the end of it. I figured they'd go on their trip, and I'd stay home and avoid the drama. But then the pictures started popping up online. The first photo was on Nick's Instagram. It was a group shot, My parents, Nick and Ethan, sitting by the pool holding drinks. The caption read, "Family time in paradise." I felt my stomach tighten as I stared at it. Family? Ethan was sitting there like he was part of something I was deliberately excluded from. Then came more photos. Ethan posted a selfie with my mom at dinner, both of them laughing. Another one of him and Nick on jet skis. Every single picture felt like a slap in the face. It wasn't just that Ethan was there. It was how comfortable they all looked with him. Like I'd been erased from the picture completely. I didn't say anything to them. What was the point? I blocked Nick and Ethan on social media and tried to push it out of my mind. But it was impossible. A mutual friend texted me a screenshot of one of the photos and asked, "Wait, why is your ex on your family vacation?" I didn't even know how to respond. When they got back, Nick called me like nothing had happened. "You missed out," he said. "The trip was amazing." I couldn't keep it in anymore. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I snapped. "You thought it was okay to bring Ethan? Do you even realize how messed up that is?" He immediately got defensive. "Oh, come on. It's not like he's your enemy. You need to grow up and move on already." Move on? You brought my ex-boyfriend on a trip meant for our family and didn't even bother to ask if I'd be okay with it. You've made it crystal clear you don't give a damn about me. "You're being dramatic," he said, laughing like I was blowing things out of proportion. "Ethan's practically family now. He needed this trip more than you did." I hung up. There was no point in arguing with him. Nick would never see my side because he never cared enough to try. This wasn't an isolated incident either. Nick had always been like this, entitled, selfish, and completely oblivious to how his actions affected other people. When I got my first promotion at work, he spent the whole family dinner talking about how his advice helped me get there. He didn't even know I was applying for the role until after I got it, but that didn't stop him from taking credit. When I called him out, he got mad at me for embarrassing him in front of everyone. Another time, he stayed at my apartment for a few nights after a fight with Kara, but it turned into 2 weeks of him treating my place like a frat house. He had people over without asking, moved my furniture around because he didn't like the layout and didn't clean up after himself. When I finally asked him to leave, he called me unsupportive and stormed out like I was the bad guy. And then there was the time he made fun of me to Ethan during our relationship, joking that I was too uptight and needed to loosen up. Ethan laughed along with him, and I brushed it off at the time, but now I see it for what it was, Nick undermining me for the sake of his own entertainment. The vacation was just the final straw. After I went no contact with Nick, my parents started guilt-tripping me. My mom called, saying, "Do you really want this fight to ruin our family? Nick didn't mean to hurt you. Can't you just let it go?" "Let it go," I said. He knew exactly what he was doing. You knew too, and you went along with it. "Do you even realize how humiliating this has been for me?" She sighed like I was the unreasonable one. Nick said Ethan really needed a break. It wasn't personal? I repeated, "It doesn't get more personal than this." "But sure, let's keep bending over backward to make Nick happy. That's what we always do, isn't it?" She started to argue, but I cut her off. "I'm done with this. If you want to keep enabling him, fine, but I'm not playing along anymore." I hung up before she could say anything else. Nick didn't take the no contact well, of course. A few weeks later, he sent Ethan to my apartment with a peace offering, a cheap bottle of wine, and some half-assed apology on Nick's behalf. I didn't even let Ethan get through his rehearsed speech before slamming the door in his face. If Nick couldn't apologize himself, I wasn't interested. That didn't stop him from trying to push boundaries in other ways. On my birthday, I planned a small dinner with a few close friends, but Nick showed up uninvited with a group of his buddies, claiming it was a surprise party. He ordered expensive drinks and appetizers for everyone, then acted shocked when the bill came and I refused to cover it. "You're really going to be this petty?" he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "This is why you weren't invited," I said, standing my ground. "If you want to throw yourself a party, pay for it." He stormed out, muttering about how ungrateful I was, but I didn't care anymore. Nick also tried to stir up drama online, posting vague statuses like "It's sad when people let grudges tear families apart, and some people just can't let go of the past." He knew exactly what he was doing, making me look like the villain while playing the victim. Mutual friends started reaching out, asking what was going on. I told them the truth, even showing them screenshots of texts where Nick admitted he knew inviting Ethan would upset me. Most of them sided with me, but a few tried to stay neutral, saying, "You know how Nick is." Yeah, I do. That's the problem. Cutting Nick off hasn't been easy. My parents still act like I'm the one causing the rift, constantly pushing me to fix things. My mom called again recently, using her usual guilt trip tactics. "Nick misses you," she said. "He told me he regrets how things went down. Can't you just talk to him?" "No," I said firmly. "Nick doesn't regret anything. He's just mad I'm not putting up with his crap anymore." "You're being stubborn," she said. "Family is all we have at the end of the day. Then maybe Nick should start acting like family." I shot back. "I'm not apologizing for standing up for myself." She sighed like she was exhausted by me, and I could feel the familiar anger bubbling up. For years, I let them push me into the role of the easy one, the one who always backed down to keep the peace. But not anymore. Since cutting Nick off, I've started focusing on the relationships in my life that actually matter. Friends who respect me, who don't take advantage of me or treat my boundaries like suggestions. It's been hard letting go of the idea that my family would ever change, but it's also been freeing. Nick might never understand why I've drawn this line, and my parents might always take his side. But for the first time, I don't care. I'm done twisting myself into knots to make everyone else comfortable. I don't know if Nick and I will ever reconcile, but I do know one thing. I'm finally putting myself first, and it feels damn good. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. My entitled stepmom called me selfish since I didn't fund my stepbrother. So, I cut them off and kept money. I'm 27, and my dad married my stepmom 6 years ago. From day one, it was obvious she had her own priorities, and I wasn't one of them. She came with a son, my stepbrother, who's now 22. It didn't take long for her to make it clear she thought the world revolved around him. The first time I met her, she was pleasant enough, overly nice even. She was full of compliments, and kept saying how excited she was to be part of our family. It felt fake, but I brushed it off. But as soon as they got married, her attitude shifted. Suddenly, I was an outsider in my own dad's house. I didn't live there full time anymore, but I still had a room for when I visited. Stepmom started dropping hints that I should stop coming over so often, saying things like, "Your dad needs to focus on this new chapter." Or, "Don't you think it's time to be more independent?" I didn't say anything at first, but the digs became more pointed. She didn't want me there, plain and simple. The first major incident came when I moved out for good. I left a lot of childhood stuff behind, old trophies, books, sentimental things. One day, I came over and found all my stuff packed into garbage bags and shoved into a damp corner of the basement. Some of it was ruined because the basement had a leak. When I asked her why she hadn't just left it in my old room, she shrugged and said, "Your stepbrother needed the space. It's not like you live here anymore." Dad didn't say much. He just mumbled something about not wanting to argue. I was pissed but didn't make a scene. I figured it wasn't worth it since I wasn't living there anymore. Still, it stung that she had no respect for my things or my place in the family. It only got worse from there. A year later, I found out my dad had saved a small wedding fund for me over the years. It wasn't a ton of money, but it was thoughtful. Somehow, stepmom found out about it and decided it wasn't fair that stepbrother didn't get the same. She told my dad they should split the money evenly between us, even though my stepbrother didn't even have a girlfriend. When I refused, she went on this whole spiel about how I was being selfish and how my stepbrother deserved a chance too. I told her the fund wasn't hers to give away and that it wasn't my responsibility to make things fair for her son. She sulked for weeks, making snide comments every time I visited. Dad avoided the topic entirely. Fast forward to last week, when the real blow-up happened. My dad invited me over for dinner, which I assumed was just a regular family thing. When I got there, stepmom was being unusually nice. She kept going on about how hard it was for young people these days, and how lucky I was to be doing so well. I nodded along, but something about the way she kept bringing it up made me suspicious. After dinner, she casually said, "You know your stepbrother has been struggling a lot lately. He's trying so hard, but he just doesn't have the resources. And you have that car sitting in your driveway most of the time. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could let him use it? It would really help him get to work and school." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious. "Wait," I said. "Are you asking me to give him my car?" She smiled, like she was talking to a clueless child. "Not give it permanently, just let him borrow it indefinitely. You work from home most of the time, so you don't really need it." It took me a second to process the audacity. "That's not happening," I said. "I paid for that car myself. I worked hard for it, and I need it for my own errands and appointments. If stepbrother needs a car, he can save up and buy one himself." Her smile vanished. "Oh, come on," she said, her tone sharper now. "You're being selfish. What kind of brother are you? Stepbrother is just trying to get ahead, and you have so much already. It wouldn't kill you to share." I wasn't in the mood to argue. "No," I said. "What selfish is expecting me to give up something I worked for because your son doesn't feel like earning it himself? He doesn't even have his driver's license yet. How is that my problem?" My stepbrother, who had been quiet this whole time, muttered, "I didn't even ask for this," which made things even more awkward. Stepmom ignored him and turned to my dad. "Are you really going to let him talk to me like this?" To my surprise, Dad backed me up for once. "He's right," he said. "It's his car, and he has no obligation to give it to anyone. You need to drop this." She stormed out of the room, muttering about how ungrateful I was and how I was tearing the family apart. Stepbrother awkwardly excused himself and went to his room. I stayed behind to talk to Dad. He admitted my stepmom had been pushing the idea for weeks, but didn't know how to bring it up without causing a fight. I told him he needed to start standing up to her because her entitlement was getting out of control. He nodded but didn't say much, which honestly didn't surprise me. Over the next few days, stepmom went on a full-blown rampage. She left me multiple voicemails, alternating between guilt-tripping and yelling. One message said, "You're tearing this family apart. I hope you're happy, making your brother feel worthless." Another said, "If you can't do this one simple thing for family, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of it." I didn't respond. I blocked her number and told Dad I wouldn't be engaging with her until she apologized. But stepmom wasn't the kind of person to back off just because I wasn't responding. A couple of weeks later, she from a different number. This time, she claimed the family was in a temporary financial crunch and asked to borrow money from my emergency savings. When I asked what the money was for, she admitted it was to cover stepbrother's driving test, some new clothes for him, and a down payment on a car. "You're doing so well financially," she said. "It's not like you'll even notice it's gone." I couldn't believe the nerve. My emergency fund is for emergencies. Mine, not stepbrother's poor planning. If you're struggling, maybe you should get a part-time job instead of waiting for handouts. She didn't take it well. "You're so selfish. After everything your father has done for you, this is how you repay us." I hung up on her and blocked that number too. Then there was the time my stepbrother texted me out of the blue, saying he needed a place to stay because he was stressed out living with stepmom. I felt bad for him at first. Living with her couldn't be easy. But instead of asking if he could stay with me, he just told me he'd be moving in the next day and that we could figure out the rent situation later. When I asked what he meant, he said he wasn't planning to pay rent, but would help out with chores. I shut that down fast. "Sorry, but my apartment isn't available. If you're stressed, maybe it's time to have an honest talk with your mom or look into a roommate situation." He tried to guilt trip me, saying I was abandoning him when he needed help, but I didn't budge. I told him I wasn't in a position to take on a roommate and that he needed to figure out his own plan. A few months later, stepmom pulled her most ridiculous stunt yet. She decided to announce to the family that I'd be hosting Christmas dinner at my apartment. She didn't ask me. She just told everyone to bring their dishes to my place, and even started giving me instructions on how to rearrange my furniture to fit everyone. When I confronted her about it, she acted like it was already set in stone. "You're young and have the most space," she said. "It's not a big deal for you to host." Family is about sacrifice. I was done playing nice. I sent a group text to the entire family, letting them know I hadn't agreed to host Christmas and wouldn't be available for any holiday gatherings at my place. I added, if anyone needs clarification, please check with stepmom about why she thought it was okay to make plans on my behalf. The fallout was amazing. Relatives started questioning her behavior, and she tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, but no one was buying it. After the car incident, things between stepmom and me hit an all-time low. She avoided me at family gatherings, but that didn't stop her from trying to stir the pot whenever she could. She started telling relatives I was selfish and ungrateful, spinning every situation to make herself look like the victim. One cousin who's close to my dad pulled me aside at a barbecue to ask why I wouldn't help out my stepbrother when he was struggling. I gave him the full rundown, and he was stunned. That's not how she told it, he said. She made it sound like you were hoarding some fancy sports car you never use and didn't care about family. This was a recurring theme. Whenever I set a boundary, stepmom would twist the story to make me look like the bad guy. But the more people found out the truth, the less her manipulations worked. The final straw came last month. Stepmom found out I'd been promoted at work and decided it was time for another favor. She called me out of nowhere to ask if I'd help pay for my stepbrother to take a life-changing coding boot camp. She said it would set him up for a great career, and he just needs someone to believe in him. I told her flat out no. I'm not a bank, and I'm done financing his potential. If he wants it, he can take out a loan or save up for it himself. That's when she lost it. She started yelling about how I was tearing the family apart and how my stepbrother would never forget how I'd abandoned him. Then she said something that crossed the line. Maybe your dad would be better off without such a selfish son. That hit a nerve. You know what? I said, maybe you're right. Because ever since you showed up, all you've done is try to milk this family for whatever you can get. I'm done being your scapegoat. Lose my number. I hung up and haven't spoken to her since. Dad's tried to mediate, but I told him I wasn't interested unless she apologized. And we both know that's not happening anytime soon. Now my relationship with my dad is complicated. He's caught between wanting to keep the peace and knowing she's out of line. I've told him he needs to decide if he's going to keep enabling her behavior or stand up for what's right. Time will tell. As for stepmom and stepbrother, I've made it clear that my boundaries aren't negotiable. If they ever need help, they can find it somewhere else. Looking back, the whole situation has been exhausting, but I've learned a lot about standing up for myself and not letting guilt control me. Family or not, entitlement isn't something I'm willing to tolerate. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. My entitled sister destroyed my engagement by her false rumor. Now, she's blaming me for sabotaging her marriage. I'm 29, and I'll admit, I've always been the one in my family who tries to keep the peace. I'm the guy everyone goes to when they need a favor, help with something, or just someone to take a side in an argument. And for years, I've done my best to live up to it. I've bent over backward, covered for people, let things go, all to avoid drama. Especially with my sister, Sarah, who's 34. Sarah is the opposite of me in nearly every way. From day one, she was the favorite child, the one who always had everyone wrapped around her finger. She was charming when she wanted to be, selfish when she didn't. Growing up, it was always Sarah first. She'd get what she wanted, and we'd all be expected to fall in line. I think the whole family knew it, but brushed it off as Sarah being Sarah. I put up with it. I kept my head down, went through life not expecting much from her. And when I did need her to come through, she'd usually flake or find a way to make it about herself. I told myself it was just the way she was. It worked out okay for years. But then I met Claire, and suddenly Sarah's behavior became more than just a family quirk. Claire and I met a couple of years ago, and for the first time in my life, I actually felt I'd found someone I could see a future with. Claire was warm, genuine, and thoughtful. We balanced each other out. I'm not a romantic type, but with her, everything just seemed to click. We got engaged last year, and for a while, life seemed almost perfect. But Sarah somehow couldn't stand that. I should have seen it coming. Sarah always had a way of throwing herself into the center of anything that wasn't about her. During the engagement party, she gave a toast that looked like it was going to be nice, but then took this weird turn. She raised her glass and said, "I just want to say, congrats to my little brother for finding someone who actually likes him for who he is." Not everyone would, right? It came out with this fake little laugh. Claire and I were standing there, humiliated in front of all our friends. But Sarah just kept talking like nothing was wrong. After that, she went on a mission. In the following weeks, she'd constantly pull Claire aside, filling her head with stories about my so-called player past, saying how I was this heartbreaker who'd left a trail of devastated women. None of it was true. I've been honest with Claire about every past relationship, and we were solid. But Sarah didn't care. She twisted every little thing to sound like I was hiding a whole other life. At first, Claire didn't say anything, but I noticed she'd get this look when we talked about past stuff. We started arguing, something we'd never done before. And I knew something was up. She'd ask me things like, "Are you sure you told me everything?" Or, "Did you ever think about telling me about that other side of you?" She wouldn't say where she was hearing this from, and it made me feel crazy. But then a friend of ours, Rachel, came to me and asked if everything was okay between us. That's when she told me Sarah had been spreading lies to everyone, saying I'd been unfaithful. That's when everything clicked. I confronted Sarah, hoping she'd deny it or say it was a joke gone wrong. But she didn't even try. She just smirked and said, "Well, it's not my fault if Claire can't handle the truth about you." She didn't even care how much damage she'd done. I tried talking to Claire, trying to explain that Sarah was lying, but it didn't matter. The doubt was already there. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I was hiding things. And no matter how much I reassured her, it wasn't enough. We tried to work through it, but it was like Sarah had poisoned the well. The trust was gone, and eventually Claire ended things. She walked away, saying it wasn't even about what Sarah said, but that she couldn't get rid of the feeling there was more to the story. Losing Claire felt like my whole world was torn apart. She'd been my best friend, the one person who understood me. And Sarah had ripped that away just because she couldn't stand seeing me happy. I cut Sarah off completely. I told her I was done, that she was no longer a part of my life. My parents tried to brush it off like they always did, saying, "You know how Sarah is," but this time I didn't care. I told them if they couldn't respect my decision, then they were choosing Sarah over me. Looking back, I realized this wasn't new behavior from Sarah. She'd always been pulling stunts to get attention or control, but I just never noticed how bad it really was. For example, every family gathering became about her. She'd interrupt people mid-story, always steering conversations back to herself, her problems, or her latest achievements. She'd even make us write out gratitude lists during Thanksgiving, expecting everyone to put her on theirs. And when we didn't, she'd throw a fit and make the rest of the night miserable. Then there were her business schemes. She always had some noob side hustle and would rope the whole family into helping her. Once, she started this online boutique and kept calling me to help her set up her website and manage her orders. I'd spend hours working on it, and she'd just take it for granted, never saying thank you or even acknowledging the time it took. Eventually, I told her I wasn't her unpaid tech support and that she'd have to figure it out herself. She acted like I'd betrayed her, calling me selfish for not supporting her dreams, or how she'd borrow things and never give them back. She'd take my camera, my tablet, even some expensive kitchen equipment, promising to return it in a week. Sometimes she'd even lend my stuff to her friends, and it would come back scratched or broken. When I finally told her she couldn't borrow anything else until she respected my things, she pouted and complained to our parents, acting like I'd just cut her off for no reason. After Claire and I split, karma hit Sarah hard. Her own marriage started to crumble. Her husband Ben, one of my friends, was a solid guy, probably too good for her, honestly. But Sarah was a serial cheater. She'd been seeing other people on the side for a while, something everyone seemed to know except Ben. When he finally found out, he cut her off financially, blocked her access to their joint accounts, and moved out. Now Sarah was furious. Suddenly, she needed the family support. She started calling everyone, acting like Ben was this monster who'd abandoned her. And then, in classic Sarah fashion, she decided to blame me for it. First, she expected me to cut Ben out of my life. I'd grown close to him over the years, and he'd been a good friend to me. But Sarah started pressuring me, saying, If you're really family, you'd stand by me. I told her flat out that just because she couldn't make her marriage work didn't mean I had to cut off my friend. She exploded, calling me disloyal and heartless, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to turn my back on someone who'd been nothing but decent to me. Next, she started pushing for a loan. With Ben gone, she was strapped for cash, and she figured I'd be an easy target. She said she just needed a little help to get through her divorce and would pay me back when she could. I told her I wasn't in a position to give her any money and that she'd have to figure it out herself. She tried guilt-tripping me, saying, "After everything I've done for you, you can't even help me?" But I didn't bite. I'd spent enough of my life bending over backward for her. And this time, I wasn't budging. And then, the final straw. She decided to just show up at my door with a suitcase one day. No call, no warning. She was ready to move in, expecting me to house her indefinitely. She said she needed a place to stay and assumed my place was her backup plan. I looked at her and said, "Sarah, you can't stay here. I'm not your safety net." She tried to argue, but I didn't let her in. After she left, I put up a security camera, just in case she tried to pull something like that again. The fallout from this whole mess was brutal, but it was also eye-opening. Losing Claire was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. But it made me realize just how much I'd let Sarah control my life. I'd let her manipulate me, guilt me, and drag me down for years. All because I thought that's just what I needed to do for family. Now, I've set firm boundaries. I've told my parents I won't have anything to do with Sarah until she takes responsibility for her actions. They're still in denial, making excuses for her. But I'm done letting them take her side over mine. I've made it clear that I'm not going to be the scapegoat for Sarah's messes anymore. As for Sarah, she's still blaming me for everything. She thinks I ruined her marriage, ruined her life, and that I owe her something for all the sacrifices she's made for me. But I'm done. I'm not going to let her guilt trip me into cleaning up the mess she's made. Life is different now. I'm focusing on my own growth, trying to heal from the pain Sarah's caused, and figuring out what I want for my future. I don't know if I'll ever get back what I had with Claire, but I've learned a valuable lesson about family and boundaries. No one is allowed to sabotage my happiness or my relationships ever again. If Sarah wants to keep blaming me for her failures, that's on her. But I'm moving forward, and I'm not looking back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.
My estranged sister left Dad for years. Now, she's back for half of his estate, but I'm honoring his final wishes. I'm 28 male. My dad recently passed away. Losing my dad was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. We knew it was coming. He'd been sick for a while, but knowing didn't make it any easier. My dad was the kind of guy who thought ahead, though, so he made sure everything was in order before he passed. His will was clear. I would inherit the majority of his estate, including his house and a significant amount of money. My sister, on the other hand, would receive a smaller portion, mostly sentimental items, and a bit of cash. The disparity in the inheritance was tough to stomach for her, but it wasn't a surprise to me. My sister, Sarah, and my dad didn't have the best relationship. She moved out when she was 18, and their interactions since had been sporadic at best. Dad tried to reconnect over the years, but she always kept her distance. Meanwhile, I stayed close, especially during his illness. I visited him almost every day, took him to his doctor's appointments, and handled all the things he couldn't manage anymore. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. When Dad's will was read, Sarah was furious. She called me selfish, saying it was unfair she got so little, and accusing me of being complicit in some grand act of favoritism. She argued that the inheritance should be split 50-50, regardless of what Dad wanted. Family is family, she said. It's not fair to punish me for the issues I had with him. But here's the thing, I don't see it that way. My dad's decisions weren't about punishment, they were about recognition. Sarah had years to repair their relationship, and chose not to. It wasn't my job to fix what she wouldn't. I told her as much, that I respected Dad's wishes, and didn't think it was my place to rewrite them. Unsurprisingly, that didn't go over well. My mom, who divorced my dad years ago, sided with Sarah. She's been telling me I should do the right thing. and give Sarah more money to keep the peace. Some friends agree with her, but others think I'm justified in keeping what I've been given. It's a mess, and honestly, it's making me question everything. Am I selfish for holding on to what Dad left me? Or am I just honoring his wishes? To fill in some gaps, let me explain a bit more about our family dynamics. My parents' divorce happened when I was 12, and Sarah was 9. It wasn't explosive. There wasn't one big event that tore them apart, but it was messy in its own way. My dad was a workaholic, running his own business and putting in long hours to provide for us. My mom felt neglected and resented how much time he spent away from the family. She'd often say things like, "He cares more about his work than his kids." Eventually the tension boiled over, and they split. After the divorce, Sarah and I ended up in different households. She stayed with Mom, while I lived with Dad. I think that's where the divide really started. Mom's bitterness toward Dad rubbed off on Sarah. She began to see him as the villain in our family's story. Over time, the distance between them grew. Dad tried. He'd call her, send her gifts, show up to important events, but she rarely reciprocated. One of the last straws was her high school graduation. Dad showed up uninvited because he wanted to celebrate her, but Sarah accused him of trying to make it about himself. After that, their relationship all but evaporated. When Dad got sick, I hoped it might be a chance for them to reconcile. I called Sarah multiple times, letting her know how serious things were, but she wouldn't come. She said she wasn't ready to see him. Dad never got angry about it. He just said, she has to come on her own terms. Unfortunately, those terms never materialized. He passed without ever getting that closure. So, when people ask why Dad didn't just split everything 50-50, I think it's pretty clear. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He was trying to reflect the reality of our family dynamic. I was there for him in his final years. Sarah wasn't. That's not to say she didn't have her reasons, but those reasons don't change the fact that Dad's decisions were his to make. Of course, that doesn't make this any easier. Sarah's been relentless. She's called me selfish, greedy, even manipulative. She's tried to frame this as me taking advantage of Dad's favoritism, but that's not how I see it. I'm not the golden child. I'm just the one who stayed. Mom's pressure hasn't helped. She's always been closer to Sarah, and I think she feels guilty about how everything played out. She's been pushing me to give Sarah more money, saying things like, "You're the older sibling. You should set an example." But I'm not sure how caving to Sarah's demands sets a good example. If anything, it feels like it would undermine everything Dad stood for. Some of my friends think I'm being too rigid. It's just money, they say. Is it really worth ruining your relationship with your sister? But other friends think Sarah is out of line. They've pointed out that she had years to make amends with Dad and chose not to. Why should I be expected to fix that now? To be honest, I'm torn. I want to honor Dad's wishes, but I also don't want to destroy what's left of my relationship with Sarah. Part of me wonders if there's a middle ground, but every time I try to bring it up, she shuts me down. It's all or nothing for her. Either I give her half the inheritance, or I'm the bad guy. I've tried to explain my perspective, but it doesn't seem to matter. To Sarah, this is about fairness. To me, it's about respect. Respect for Dad's decisions, respect for the time and energy I put into caring for him, and respect for the reality of our family's history. I can't change what happened between Dad and Sarah, and I don't think it's fair for her to expect me to. At the same time, I'm not blind to the bigger picture. Money has a way of tearing families apart, and I don't want this to be the thing that ruins ours. But where do I draw the line? How much am I supposed to sacrifice to keep the peace? And is it even worth it if the peace is so one-sided? For now, I'm sticking to my decision. I'll respect Dad's wishes and keep the inheritance as he intended. If Sarah wants to talk, I'm open to it, but I'm not going to let her guilt me into something that feels wrong. I hope she can understand that someday, but even if she doesn't, I need to make peace with it myself. In the end, this isn't just about money. It's about love, loss, and the complicated ways those things intertwine. My dad wasn't perfect, and neither is our family, but he did the best he could, and I'm trying to do the same. Maybe that's all any of us can do. There's another layer to all of this, one I've been hesitant to talk about because it's deeply personal. Growing up, Sarah always felt closer to Mom. They had this bond I could never quite understand, and I often felt like an outsider when the three of us were together. Dad was my anchor in those moments. He'd take me fishing, help me with my homework, or just sit and talk with me when things felt too overwhelming. He wasn't perfect, but he made me feel seen in a way I didn't always get from Mom or Sarah. I think that's part of why I'm so protective of what he left me. It's not just about the money or the house. It's about preserving the connection we had. Every time I walk into that house, I feel like he's still there with me. The idea of giving up a part of that to someone who barely acknowledged him in his final years feels like a betrayal, not just of him, but of everything we shared. At the same time, I can't ignore the guilt that's been creeping in. What if Sarah's right? What if I'm holding on to this inheritance out of spite, even if I don't realize it? I've been replaying our conversations in my head, trying to figure out if there's any truth to what she's saying. But every time I come back to the same conclusion. This isn't about her. It's about him. It's about honoring the choices he made and the life he built. Recently, I've been thinking about what Dad would say if he were here. Would he want me to stand my ground? Or would he want me to find a way to make peace with Sarah? I'll never know for sure, but I like to think he'd understand why I've made the choices I have. He always believed in taking responsibility for your actions, and I'm trying to do that, even if it's messy and imperfect. Sarah and I haven't spoken much since the argument about the inheritance. Every time I've tried to reach out, it's ended in another fight. I miss her though. Despite everything, she's still my sister, and I don't want this to be the thing that drives us apart forever. But I also know that I can't keep bending over backward to make her happy, especially when it feels like she's unwilling to meet me halfway. In the end, I think this situation has taught me a lot about family, grief, and the way we carry the people we've lost. Dad's legacy isn't just in the money or the house he left behind. It's in the lessons he taught me and the memories we shared. That's what I'm holding on to, and that's what I'll continue to honor, no matter how complicated things get with Sarah. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that love and loss are never simple. They're messy, beautiful, and painful all at once. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what makes them so powerful. So, for now, I'll keep moving forward, one step at a time, holding on to the love and letting go of the rest.